Hi.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I was getting a little nervous because I only saw one person in the waiting room, and I always have these sort of technophobia of having
Zoom keeps us
screwed it.
humble.
Oh my God, tech people who are friendly and nice and make it easy for us deserve to be rich.
That's right. Exactly. I must say it does beat traveling sometimes, you know.
Oh, I'm spoiled to death. I have to be. Oh, you must be. Because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
traveled a lot more than I did. But I am. I don't know as I'm looking forward to it or not. I like this. So
Hopefully we'll go back to a blend. I don't mind traveling when
right,
it's really, really useful, you know.
right,
I mean, there are moments and there are places, but there's a lot of time. It's just a lot of planes, trains, and automobiles.
right. I have
Yeah.
to tell you, I am selfishly not tasting the Chardonnay, but I put my nose in it, and it's just glorious.
Oh,
Oh
nice.
my God, it's so good. It smells wonderful. It smells exotic. So one of the things, I know you're going to go there, but I'm dying to know your explanation of what the Hungarian oak brings to the table aromatically, because I haven't had enough experience. The thing that's striking me, actually, with both of these wines, and the Obsidian I've tasted repeatedly, is that there's nothing weird about it. I mean, it isn't like American oak that's the little elephant in the room, right?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
care how long you cooper it or anything.
Yeah, well, it's I do get into that because it's an interesting question. It's the two main species of oak in Europe, and they're all the same across the continent. So then it comes down to a question of terroir, and not unlike having Pinot Noir in Oregon versus Pinot Noir in Burgundy, et cetera, et cetera. There is quite a bit of that, and we actually spend a lot of time and energy on that research. So, for example, going to the aromatics. Two things. One is it's very tight grained, the tightest grained oak that we know of, and tight grained specifically. Actually, I don't go too much into this at this level of presentation.
Right.
But tight grain means that there's more spring oak than summer oak proportionally across the whole, because spring oak is always the same thickness when you build it on the outside of the tree. If you have shorter summers, you have less summer oak, which is the brown part. Now, the brown part is where the tannins come from, but the spring oak is where all the aromatics come from. So historically, tight grained oak has been really well regarded because it is more aromatically driven than wide grain oak. So the other interesting thing is that the species themselves differ. And Quercus petraea, which is the only two forests in Europe that are Quercus petraea, which means oak of the rocks, are Tokaj and Transe. And yeah, and that species, I have a slide I'll show you, but that species itself is more aromatically driven than tannically driven. And so as a result, that wine that you have, those two wines are both fermented. Oh, no, the Cabernet is not fermented in the barrel, but the Chardonnay is fermented in the barrel. But it doesn't come across as overtly oaky. And what's interesting about the Quercus petraea specifically, and why Transe was always very highly regarded by the French, it still is, it's the most expensive wood in France, is because it's 100% or close to 100% Quercus petraea. Subsequently, or also that there's one interesting thing, and we don't really know. We know we have a correlation, but not a causation. And the correlation is that the Hungarian oak generally has less vanillin.
I was just going to ask you about that because
Yeah,
I'm
and
not
so
getting a wave of vanilla out of the Cabernet, and it's almost half new oak, right?
correct. And
Right.
vanillin is interesting because it's a pretty powerful sweetener, right? It does make wines
Right.
taste sweeter. Now in Bordeaux, and we've actually, it's interesting. I've been to Bordeaux with our customers there because we sell barrels about 500 plus barrels. So now it's 600 barrels in many countries, but 600 wineries. It's not quite sweet enough for Bordeaux. And some of the Bordelais wines, especially in cooler years, they actually look for that sweetness from the oak to flesh out and make
the ripeness, right? Because they're not. But you know what? Still, when you get a lot of vanilla, I don't care how good the fruit is. There's at least a period of time, even on the most, maybe sometimes especially on the most ambitious reds, where it just sits on it.
Yeah.
It's just like a hat. It doesn't, integrate. And I find that when I smell the Obsidian, I mean, I have an impression of wood, but it's just beautiful. It's like somebody put the right amount of salt and oregano in the sauce.
Yeah, right. And this is particularly true with vanillin in what we call solar wines. Solar wines being sort of warmer region wines, Napa, Barossa, Argentina, where we do get fruit ripeness. And there the issue is if you add more vanillin onto fruit ripeness, even if you don't have residual sugar, it comes across as quite sweet.
Sweet.
And to your point about it sits on top, I use that analogy. It's like, everybody likes a sundae, right? But you don't need to do chocolate and caramel and sprinkles, like at some
cherries,
point.
Right. At some point you got to stop.
Right. It's always, we taste in the matrix. And so if something is, as I don't have to tell you this, but if something is sticking out, then we notice it as being a little bit odd, or it, like you say, sitting on top.
The older I get, by the way, the more I want people to tell me, because something I've always, first of all, I don't mind saying I don't know. And secondly, if I ask 10 of all y'all the same question, I get 10 different answers. And I just think, and this is even my colleagues, the brainiacs, it's amazing to me, especially even the ones that aren't high on the ego meter, but they may have very different perception of why something is the way it is. I'm keeping an eye on the waiting room, but sure. I'm going to give it a few more.
Well, quite frankly, one of the things, and we've seen a lot of this with this whole question of smoke taint, we taste very different things from our basic physiology. Some people, and there's a lot of research about our biome, our saliva, all of this that we break down. We have enzymes so some people will taste a wine and it's not smoky to them. They don't have the enzyme that breaks the glycoside smoke compound.
Oh, so it's like the artichoke thing in your tongue, it doesn't.
Well, like artichoke, some people can pick up cork taint from 2 miles, 2 miles in the dark. Other people drink a bottle of what we would consider fairly corky wine. They're like, well, it doesn't bother me. And it's not just because they don't know. It's because sometimes our physiology is such that we're tasting very different things.
Well, it's funny, and then I'll start letting people in. But it occurred to me, I swear today, I'm lucky enough to be on the Master of the World panel. That's where, I remember, I don't know if you saw my email, but I did a custom kit for a large number of Merrill Lynch Bank of America people. And it was a blind kit. And the last wine was Obsidian Cabernet. And where was I going with this? I was thinking about this, the blind tasting thing, because when I taste with Tim Gazer and Evan Goldstein, we come at it very differently. And then it occurred to me, and it's 101. I may not perceive what Tim perceives.
Absolutely.
And plus he's more inclined to perceive and define, whereas I really have to push myself to define. I don't care. I trust the wine. So
I'll tell you, Madeline, completely fascinating experience for me is even by country. So we have our cooperage partnership with Tannin Structure is based in Cognac. So most of our team is European based, our sales team and so forth. And I go to Europe quite often. We have our facility in Hungary. They taste wine as a whole. We taste wine in parts.
Right.
And they will talk often about the impression and how the length and yeah, sure, they'll break it down a little bit, but there's not a lot of sort of pencil lead and
the blueberry facing west, right.
And it's so interesting because they look at it like less analytical and more aesthetic.
And even professionals.
I can't think of a better word.
You're talking about winemakers.
I'm talking about winemakers.
People who really know what the hell they're talking about. Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, look, we will use those descriptors to talk about specific things, but that's more like, I wonder if it's the toast level. That's a very sort of inside baseball terminology, but we wouldn't describe the wine. All right, I'm going to try to use the share.
Okay, please, because if not, I will, let's see. I was told to right click. Oh, there you go. Hi.
Okay. So perfect. I will now make this full.
Great. And this is great. And I love the label, by the way, on the Poseidon. It's just fantastic. And you're talking to a Greek, so I look at it and I see Poseidon, right?
Well, it's funny you should say that. Sometimes I joke that it represents man's struggle to find good Chardonnay.
There you go. And it's sea level. So now, are you going to put a different view on this? Because I have a whole
Yeah.
panel off to
Yeah.
the right.
Yeah, I
Okay,
just wanted to
cool.
make sure.
And then you're going to go back to, oh, you're just making sure it's showing well. Cool.
Yeah.
Great.
I'll just leave this up for now.
Okay, cool. And I will.
Unless you want me to stop sharing, it's fine.
No, that's fine. I think what I'm going to do is admit everybody and say hi.
I'm in Easter. I'm on Easter.
Hello, everyone. Oh,
Okay.
you've already started chatting. Yay. Hi, Robin. I've got, I don't think you need to know what order we're doing the wines in because there's a white and a red. And even I can't be confused.
Why are you sitting over there?
See
Oh,
who's
you're
joining
not so-
us.
There?
Hello, Rod.
This is-
Andy, it's good
Hi,
to
Matt.
see you. Hi, Paul.
You opened the unfitted ones. Unfortunately.
I see the Castlemans. Welcome. Hi, Randy. Hi, Mike. I'd be disappointed if you weren't here. Everyone say hi to Peter. We're going to give it a few minutes. We have like 50-ish people signed up, so I don't want to be in a big hurry to start. And we should be able to get through it in a timely fashion. Peter, God love you, is going to do all the work. I didn't have to do the PowerPoint slides today, so I feel like I'm on vacation.
Well, we're still in the middle afternoon here, so you can, Madeline, you can take, you're in happy hour, evening hour, so I'll
Yes,
take it
I'm
from
going to
here.
be aware, but I won't punch out. How's that? Hello, Adam. Let's see who I've forgotten. And I think I'm going to go ahead while we're waiting for just a couple more minutes. And cheers to everyone who's already here. Welcome to the Obsidian Wine Company tasting, but I have not tasted the Chardonnay. So I've been telling Peter that I've been smelling it and it smells divine, but I'm going to selfishly give it a taste. And I have let mine warm up a little bit, Peter. I also perversely, I don't know if you ever do this, but I chilled the Cabernet because I like to see it warm up.
I always do that. I always tell people, if you want a wine to taste $20 more better, put it in the fridge for 20 minutes before you have it.
No, it's true. And actually, it's funny, we were talking about the Master of the World kits. I keep the whites and the reds at the same temperature. I pour them at the same time and it works out great. So
Yeah. Well, the old saying is we drink our whites too cold and our reds too
and our
warm.
red's too warm.
But it's true. I mean, it's especially, you get so, especially for wines that are not, like, for example, $15 wines. If you cool it just a little bit, often those wines can be a little bit too alcoholic, especially West Coast wines, a little too hot. But if you cool it down, the alcohol doesn't come off the wine so quickly. So you get more fruit as a result. And so your first impressions of the wine are always fruitier and nicer than if it's warm.
You know, I had a mini revelation a couple of days ago. I tasted a wine that I thought would be helped a white by being a little bit colder. I had let it warm up too much, but it actually didn't improve it. And it occurred to me that actually quality will sing through at any temperature. It's just somehow it's harder to catch it sometimes when it's at the wrong temp. Whereas I don't think you can seriously elevate, a mediocre wine, but that's just a thought. Let's see, I have somebody in the waiting room and why can I not?
Well, this brings to mind, you always get this question, like, what's my favorite wine? And I say, well, the one in front of me, because I can only drink one at a time.
That is utterly true.
Like, I'm not really sure why I would think about all the other wines I could have had. Doesn't seem very productive.
Not only that, but sometimes I'm never dreaming about a better wine. I just enjoy what I have in front of me. And if I'm not, I stop and I go back to tea or nothing.
Madeline, I think I've seen you with 12 glasses in front of you with a very nice placemat, though, occasionally.
Yes, Andy, say hello to Peter. Peter, this is my friend Andy. We tasted wine together more decades ago than we care to admit, either of us, but both of us have been in front of, oh, hell, Andy, more than 12 wines, right?
I think there were some in Aspen where we tried to fit 16 on one placemat and tried to get through them in an hour and 15 minutes. Didn't quite work as well, but a lot of good commentary though, and a lot of interesting flavors.
Okay, everyone's still coming in, but I think I'm going to officially say hello to someone, and I'll just keep an eye on the waiting room. Welcome on this. Oh, well, it's been a beautiful Michigan spring. Some people are in Chicago. Peter is in sunny California. And today we're having a cool, rainy Michigan day. That's all right. We had snow, 4 or 5 days ago? So, welcome to 2021. This is a tasting I've very much been looking forward to. We were originally going to have Peter and Arpad Molnar with us, but I think, isn't Arpad in Hog Bay tasting wine with oysters and he has bad reception? Is that correct, Peter? So,
yeah, that's right. He's out with, we do a lot of tastings with Hog Island Oyster Company. With those of you who've been out to San Francisco, they're very well known. And they have a whole concept of terroir, which is how the type of water and the temperature of the water will change the taste of oysters, and we pair it with wines, and we talk about terroir and terroir, and it's so he's out there doing that, and there's zero reception out there.
Well, we are happy to have you. We're not thinking of just you, because I know you can more than tell enough stories and carry 3 balls. So we're very happy to have you with us. And by the way, I would have to learn to eat oysters to participate in the terroir. So I'm happy that he's doing it with folks that eat oysters. I had billed this as a new frontier, and then I forgot to define it actually in the heading of the invitation, but we're talking about the Red Hills in Lake County. This particular Cabernet Sauvignon, Obsidian Ridge from Obsidian Wine Company, is something I was turned on to over a year ago, Peter, by a member of our team, Travis, who now handles all of our e-commerce. And it was a revelation to me, because it has a reflection of terroir that I've never experienced, and I know you're going to speak to that. I think maybe a couple of people need to mute. There's a little bit of background noise. Just take a quick look at your screen. But I've tasted it repeatedly over the last few months, and I'm happy to say that it's very well received in both Chicago and Michigan. So I was so happy to have you on, because I think the story and the appellation, not to mention the pivot to Hungary and oak, is very cool indeed. So we're thrilled to have you here. Just a couple of pieces of housekeeping for everyone. You are welcome to unmute if we take a breath. By all means, keep any comments and questions going in the chat room. I know we have our friend Marshall in the background. Marshall, Peter, is a member of our team that reads more than all of us put together on wine. So he often can answer questions before we get to them, and correctly 99% of the time. So that's always a plus.
Just here to help, thanks.
You bet. Always good to have your company.
It's better than my batting average.
Well, you know what? And I think I've actually, I have to dump information now to take new information in. And I always double check my info, because I never know how long I've been holding on to it. We've got 2 wines. Go ahead and taste them if you have both of them. And I certainly hope you have both. The Chardonnay is mouthwatering, by the way. I didn't comment on it. It's just delightful. Peter's going to address them in whatever order he likes. I had originally suggested we do the Cabernet first, but since you are this subject, you can timeline this however feels comfortable to you. And I will, however, if you don't mind, though you may touch on it, give a teeny bit of background on you. So you actually were playing / working in the vineyards in Napa when your father was growing grapes for other wineries. Is that correct? So
Yep, that's right. My first stint was in an old green army surplus tent that we set up on a corner. The super thick, heavy ones for like the Second World War.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we were there, and I was 14 my first summer. I didn't work the whole summer, but as soon as I learned how to drive a tractor at 15, I thought this was really pretty fun.
Fantastic. So you got a taste of it. Now then you and your brother moved to Hungary. You were adults at that point in time. Did you move together? I keep meaning to ask you, was there a why?
Well, the why was the fall of the wall in 1990. I graduated University College at that time, and we had some of the language from growing up at home, and nothing felt quite as fun and adventurous as finding the old country. In Budapest, for those of you who've been there, is a great, fun city, and was then too. I always tell people that the first job I got, I was paid $16,000 a year, and I could not spend more. I still had $6,000 left at the end of the year. So it was, for a young person at age
Hungry. Whoa, what more could you want?
For a young person, a new graduate. I mean, the joke was always like Paris after the war. But what happened there was, I ended up getting involved with the privatization of the wine industry, and meeting dozens and dozens of wineries, winemakers, and they were all coming out from that old system and producing their own little wines. I remember dinners where you'd have a big dinner, and then at the end of the dinner, you'd move the table, you go down in the trap door and go taste through the barrels. It was really amazing revelation to me about the history of Hungarian winemaking. I knew about it, of course, but as a young person, that's all.
So your parents were Hungarian, or one of your parents was Hungarian?
Both of my parents were Hungarian. They left during the revolution in 1956.
So did they speak Hungarian at home? Do you speak
the
language?
Yes, we still speak Hungarian.
That's fantastic. You have to tell us a little something here and there. We need a snippet. Just say, hi, everybody. How are you doing in Hungarian?
Szívesen, which means with pleasure.
Polikala, that means good in Greek. Okay. So welcome, we're thrilled to have you here, and we are very much looking forward to hearing about the genesis of your company, which includes Cabernet in Lake County and Chardonnay in Carneros, and at one point included Pinot Noir. So that's a question for a little bit later, what happened to the Pinot. So
we still have it.
Oh, good to know. Well,
yeah.
The Midwest of the United States welcomes you. We're thrilled to have you with us.
Thank you. So nice to see everyone. It's nice to be back in the Midwest. I first came out with to work in Michigan I think 3-4 years ago. Visit Ann Arbor and all around. It's a lovely part of the world, and I'm thrilled to quote be here and visit with you. So I'm going to talk a lot about. I'll go quickly. I like to cover ground because there's a lot of ground to cover in winemaking, and it's endlessly fascinating. I think it's one of the things I've been doing this now this was my 31st vintage. There's never a boring one. And diving into all of our sources. And is really for me, the joy of the work, working with the materials in the forest, in the vineyard, and in the cellar, figuring out our style. So we've been working at this for 25 years now. And Chardonnay was one of the first things we did. So what I'm going to do is go into our various sources and tell the story from a source point of view. This is Poseidon Vineyard, where you're tasting the Chardonnay from, which is the very southernmost vineyard in Napa, California. So bring yourself back to 1973, 74. My dad and his friends were starting to make a little money. They'd been in California for, at that point, about 20 years. And wine industry was really starting to move. Warren Wynarski, Bob Mondavi, all of that crowd. And a lot of people needed grapes. And one of them was Domaine Chandon for sparkling. And my dad met with John Wright, who was running the project. And he said, Nicholas, if you can find the coolest site in California, in Napa Valley, I will buy your grapes. And so my dad drove down Milton Road, which is right there on the right, came to the marina and said, I better turn around. Drove in and went into this driveway, which is owned by the Episcopaches, was an Italian family. They had dairy cattle, and they had tomatoes mainly and vegetables. And we bought 100 acres in 1973.
And this is truly sea level. I mean, you have that
this
on the
is
top
truly
of the
sea
cork,
level.
by
Yeah.
the way, which I loved.
Yeah, it's truly sea level. It's got the defining characteristic here is fog. We have a lot more fog here in Southern Carneros than even Northern Carneros, not to mention up valley. And fog is critical for maintaining good acidity. So that's what defines this site. 20 years later, when my brother and I came back from Hungary, and we met our partner, Michael Tarian, who was originally from Portland, Maine. He was, I always joke, he was a philosophy major with a fishing problem. He had worked as a commercial fisherman off the coast of Maine, and he came out west and wanted to make wine. We met over a beer through friends and started making our first Pinots in 1994, actually, kind of garage wine. It was this beautiful old stone winery up on Howell Mountain. A friend gave us some space and we made 4 barrels of Pinot, but we started really thinking about mountain fruit. We loved mountain Cabernets, spring, Vite, or Diamond Mountain. So in 1998, we found this beautiful site up here, which is the Canucki Volcanic Shield, the youngest volcanic flow in Northern California. And we planted 100 acres on an abandoned walnut orchard. And finally, our third source is the oak of Tokaj. This is the 1,500 volcanic mountains that make up the Tokaj forest region, which is abuts the Tokaj wine region, and it is the tightest grained oak in Europe, and it is the only forest with Trançay in France to be 100% Quercus petraea. So all of the wines that we make are from those sites, and we use only our barrels. We are one of very few wineries in the world who do that. Bodega Vega Sicilia is one of them. Silver Oak is another. So either we were clever or stubborn, but I would like to say, I would think mainly it was just that we kind of fell into these places like my dad did driving down the road in the 70s. We found the abandoned walnut orchard in the 90s, and then we came across Hungarian oak when we were working there, and we just have sort of sewn those 3 themes together. So let's get to the themes. I'm going to talk about the oak first because there's a commonality to all the wines, and they kind of frame, no pun intended, the wine. Our cooperage is named Kadar. And this is an overview, of course, of Europe without borders. And the reason I start with this is because trees don't know borders, as it turns out. They are distributed across Europe. And there are two major bioregions. One is a sort of the center, not including Spain, France, and then the Carpathian Basin, which Hungary sits in the middle of. The Carpathian Basin is the largest bioregion in Europe. It is ringed by mountains that go up to 11,000 feet, and it has some of the most diverse oak forest in Europe. So the story goes back further than that, the last ice age. Essentially, there are bands of trees around the world. You have pine, you have beech, you have oak. An oak band runs around all across the world. There are about 600 species of oak. It comes from a bush in Malaysia, best they know, about 250 million years ago. There are 600 species, and about 3.5 of them taste good. And 2 of them are in Hungary, and in Europe rather, Quercus petraea and Quercus rubor. Quercus alba, American white oak, is also used for barrels, as you know. The third and a half oak is an oak done in Oregon that's used a lot for beer and spirits. So again, these are the 2 main bioregions where we get oak in Europe. Our specific region is this volcanic hillside region of Tokaj. We call it Tokaj oak because that is where our cooperage, our mill is, but the oak from there is all very much similar. And this is a closer look at it. And this is a geological map of that region. As you can see, this is all very young. This is a flow that exploded into an inland sea about 4 million years ago. And this is the distribution of forests throughout that region. Mind you, this is a survey map of every forest by county, by acre or hectare in Austro-Hungary in 1896. So green is pine, dark brown is pine, light brown is beech, and green is oak. So there's extensive oak in this part of the world. Some of you may have come across Slavonian oak. If you've read about that, that is typically down to the lower left. We are this Tokaj oak region here. And this is a map of all the wine regions in Hungary in the late 1800s as well. They had the same acreage as France. And the diversity of wines go from today, on the left, you're talking about Croatia, Slovenia, Burgenland, and Vienna,
Austria,
Olaton, Tokaj, et cetera, and of course Transylvania, which is a very important and very beautiful wine region and is now reemerging. So there's a lot of history here. So let's talk about the oak itself. These are the 2 species, Quercus petraea and Quercus rubor. Petrea for the Latin, oak of the rocks. It's because it lives and it moves, it propagates on the ridges. Quercus robur from robust in Latin, it's usually down by the rivers and the creeks. Typically much bigger because there's more water and more moisture. The Quercus robur is spread by ground animals, and Quercus petrea is spread mainly by birds, avian pathways. This is why most forests in Europe are a blend of the two, and there are only a few, Tronçais and Tokaj, which are 100% Quercus petrea, because there weren't many big riverbeds to make the repopulation after the last ice age. So why is all this important? Well, it turns out that they have very different aromatic compounds. I won't go into each of these, but the ones on the left are all, there are 10 samples of wine taken from Quercus robur barrels, and the one on the right are 10 samples from Quercus petrea. And what you'll note is those are all precursors for aromatics. So these barrels in this oak, like Tronçais does or Tokaj does, it actually lifts a lot of the fruit components of the wine. So the Chardonnay that you're having is actually is barrel fermented in the barrel. It's 30% new, which is not a small amount these days. People have really backed off on it, but you don't get an overtly oaky characteristic out of it. You get much more of an aromatic lift of it. The other
actually, I'm going to interrupt only to describe what I'm perceiving, because we were talking about this before everybody else joined us. And what I don't get on either the Chardonnay or the Cabernet is a sense of overt vanilla, which you often get from new French oak, which obviously can include Tronçais. But I just get a general impression of oak, and it doesn't interfere with the aromatics of the fruit at all. This smells like apples and pears to me, and a minerality, and actually a florality also. So I was trying to get Peter to define, what does this oak, smell like? What does it lend? Because whatever it is, it's integrating nicely with the wine.
So it's interesting. We don't know why exactly. We think it has, and we know it has to do with climate and soil, which I'll get to in a second. But French oak tends to have more vanillin, and the Tokaj oak tends to have more eugenol. Eugenol is the base compound for cinnamon, clove, and nutmeg. So you tend to get more of that characteristic, like a spice component. And often with the red wines, I often think of, like, for example, in North Africa, they will use those types of spices in meat dishes, as opposed to your standard rosemary and garlic and that you'll get into the North Mediterranean. So that's one little distinction. We're not really sure why. It's super complex. What we do know is it's very unusual where it grows. This is a soil cut in Tokaj. I remember driving up an old Soviet Army Jeep in 1992, I think it was. And I said, oh, that's a beautiful outcropping of limestone. And the forester was like, son, that's not limestone, and it's not an outcropping. It's rhyolitic tufa.
What is that?
It's a volcanic ash that what happens when it explodes into underwater, it has tons of little bubbles in it. And if you picked it up, it looks like an ossified sponge. So if you can believe it, the tree grows, this is only 2 or 3 feet of soil. The rest of it, the roots go all the way down in there.
So are vineyards planted on this stuff?
Yeah, so yes, a lot of this is the base material for Tokaj, and I'll show you some of the region in a second. There's some vineyards right at the bottom of these forests. It's also quite cold. It's a short growing season. And as a result, the trees, these are almost 100-year-old trees, and they are, imagine, 30, 40 centimeters across. So extremely tight grained, and tight grained oak especially is more aromatic than it is tannic. So for example, with the Cabernet, which we'll taste a little bit later on, that is actually one of the things we like about it, is that wine as mountain fruit has plenty of fruit tannins, lots of structure. We don't need to add tannins. We would love to have more aromatics come out, and that oak really helps with that. And that's a pure function of terroir. So this is the village where we bring the logs to. This is Aire de Beigne. It's one of the 7 original historic wine towns of Tokaj. You may know that Tokaj and Burgundy are the two oldest appellations in Europe. They have arguments back and forth about who was first. Basically, the idea is that Tokaj was the first to put a border around the whole region and say, this is wine from Tokaj, and what is outside is not.
Actually, there's a region in northern Portugal that claims to have the first delineated, appellation. So let them all argue about it.
The beat goes on, I'm sure, but yeah. Right. And then, but the idea is the Burgundians were the first to classify. This is a village called in what's called the Cadarach Village. The valley that you see in the background is called the Valley of the Coopers. There is a 1,000-year written history of cooperage in this village. It's one of the oldest traditions of barrel making in the world.
My God, this is so beautiful.
Yeah, it's very pretty. And this is, I go up hiking in the mornings. There's a little volcanic hill in the middle of town. So that's the picture I took. And down the road, about 5 kilometers down, is our wood mill and our seasoning yard. We mill all our own staves and we season all our own staves. And we have, if you notice here in the foreground, we did this drone shot when we just bought this forest. Actually, the forest had regrown. It was a pasture at one point. But we decided, we've been doing a lot of research around climate change and the effect on seasoning and so forth. And it turns out there's shade structures and nets and misters and so forth. But the reality is having a living tree nearby is the best for maintaining the envelope of moisture and biological activity that you need for proper seasoning.
So how long is the wood outside being seasoned?
2 to 3 years. And so when we developed this, we kept these little parklets in the middle. And so now this is what it looks like. The oak is kept under, in the very beginning, we put it under these loose tarps, nets, just to increase the moisture. And what we're trying to, everybody talks about biome these days, we're basically trying to kickstart the biome that's going to digest this wood. There are hundreds of bacteria and fungi that digest this wood and transform the compounds and create different flavors. This is exactly the same as when you go to Italy or France and you visit these old caves with the different cheeses. That cave has a certain biome that makes that basic cow milk turn into a very different cheese. Very much the same with oak. We are really now starting to understand the impact of this. I'm not going to tell you that we control it because it's way too
Mother Nature. Yes.
But what we're trying to do is create the ideal conditions for these populations to maintain. So, for example, this picture here, you can see that they're stacked too high. This is about 10 barrels worth of wood. You can see that this gap is a little bit narrower than this gap. Again, it's because of a humidity thing.
Can you go around what is 10 barrels worth of wood so we can understand that?
It's about a cubic meter of wood.
A cubic meter of wood. And before I forget to ask,
in volume, yeah.
The tannin structure is different that it imparts to wine. Just to remind us all that the drying tannin is contributed, yes, by the skins of grapes, but also by the wood that the wine is fermented in or aged in. So you have resulting softer tannins, is that correct, Peter? So
here we're trying, of course, yes, part of seasoning is to get rid of the greener, harsher components of wood, but that's only step one. And then what we're doing is for seasoning for 2 to 3 years is to basically, I would say, deepen the flavor of the wood. We've done electron microscope analysis of these pieces of wood after 5 years. Every single cell has been digested by something.
Huh.
And so going to your tannin question, tannin is pretty tricky. Tannin is not necessarily additive. Wood tannins often hydrolyze with fruit tannins. And so new oak can really help smooth out tannins. They combine with fruit tannins, so we don't have them we can't break them down with our saliva.
I am very happy to hear you say this because I have some brilliant friends who, insist that they can tell the difference between wood tannins and fruit tannins. And I've always been...
With all due respect to your friends, there is not a laboratory in the world, and the French do this very, very well, that can even do it chemically.
Oh, good. I can bring this up at a little conclave.
So this is how it looks. It's absolutely beautiful. What Zoom doesn't approach is how good this smells. When you walk through these staves, just the smell of oak seasoning and fresh oak in the mill. It struck me once, we were milling a piece of wood. I wasn't, but I was there, and that smell of fresh wood is just amazing. I was like, oh my gosh, this is basically the accumulation of 100 summers of sunlight, what we're smelling here. Right, because all those sugars and compounds are connected and contacted in that wood.
Do you get that those baking spices out of this? The clove, cinnamon, nutmeg. Can you smell that? Yeah.
At different stages. It's once it transforms with wine, it's a little bit different. It's just lovely fresh oak. I mean, you've probably you cut a pine tree, it smells great. I mean, Christmas tree, right? You have that immediate rush of aromatics. Now, Christmas trees. Pine, they use it in Retsina. Oak is particularly nice for wine. Though we make barrels out of acacia, mulberry, wild cherry wood for different projects. But it's lovely when you go in there and you walk through, and as you can see, it's right in the forest from where it all comes from. This is one of the most natural seasoning yards in in the world.
When we can fly again, will you welcome us there? Do you?
Oh,
accept
absolutely. It's
visitors?
lovely. I tell people, if you haven't been to Tokaj,
Mhm.
it's about a 3-hour drive from Budapest. So the next stage we make is toasting. Toasting is very, very tricky and very, very simple. You've all done this at home. You take a piece of toast and you put it in the one setting, the 2 setting, or the 3rd setting. You get different compounds in the toast. We get different compounds in the wood. As the heat warms up these staves, and it's almost an hour, these staves, these compounds will transform. So because it's a very tight grain, very light aromatic oak, our toasting tends to be very low and slow. So we try to avoid a lot of charry notes or even heavy toasty notes. If you over toast a barrel, you can actually make the wine quite creamy. And for example, in the Chardonnay, we want to keep that good minerality and good acidity that we get from the site. So we use a very slow, low toast for this barrel. We often use larger format barrels, like 300-liter barrels. And now we're starting to use big casks again. This year, we did a big cask Chardonnay and big cask Pinot Noir as well.
Can you speak just briefly to, whatever you feel like it, about how the production method of the Chardonnay? I got to tell you, I'm sitting here, it's lifted, can't perceive alcohol. There's a salinity to it. It smells like lime blossom. I just love it. It's
I will
singular.
happily do so. I'm just about to I'll get to the site again and we'll go over it, what I think is going on. But one of the things that's not going on, it's not toasty and it's not creamy and it's not charry.
Right.
And that's from the toasting. This is our fearless leader in Hungary, András Kalidi, a good friend of mine. He's been working with the cooperage now for 20 years. His grandfather was a forester who managed close to 300 foresters and 250,000 acres in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So he grew up in the summers walking with his retired grandfather through the forests, which is how he got into the cooperage business. It's a great story. And this is Laszlo. He's our large cask maker. I love it. He's a great guy. And I love this picture because there's so much pride involved with this work. This is one of the oldest craft traditions in Europe, and he basically builds those by hand. So these are the ones we're using now for Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So we have a series of pictures of the whole team doing this back at the winery.
How many liters? Because I was going to ask.
Those were 3,000 liters.
So they're large.
They're roughly 4,000 bottles.
And I don't know if you saw the question that just came through. You sell to a lot of wineries in Europe, correct?
We do. So we joined, our cooperage joined the Tannin Structure group about 12 years ago now, which is based in Cognac. They also operate Canton Cooperage in Kentucky. And so, yes, we supply close to 600 wineries now. We're still a fairly small cooperage. We make about 5,000 barrels a year, but we supply about 600 wineries around the world, all over. I mean, I just saw that we sent a few barrels to Thailand. I mean, go figure. I'm not sure what they're making there. We have our own, the mill has its own little cellar. When we moved to this facility, hadn't been used for decades, and the coopers asked if they could clean it out. And we said, sure, absolutely. And they actually moved in with their own barrels, and they make their own wines there. I think we're one of the few cooperages that makes their own wine. And these are the very traditional Gunzi barrels. These are 136-liter barrels that were used for Tokaj making. And a lot of the fruit is actually grown by the coopers in their family plots in the Tokaj region. So if you come out, we'll pour you a glass. So coming back a little closer to home in North America, we'll talk about the vineyards. And so Poseidon Vineyard is here on the left. It's the southernmost vineyard in Napa Carneros. It is below sea level. And then to the right up here is the high Mayacamas. The Mayacamas Mountains divide and define the North Coast. It comes from the Native American term, the home of the mountain lion. And as you can see,
I didn't know that.
Vintner, Spring, Diamond Mountains, Howell Mountains over here, and Red Hills is to the north. We'll get to the Red Hills in a second. Poseidon Vineyard, we bought it in 1973, and then we planted it specifically to sparkling. Half of the vineyard still goes to sparkling for Mumm. And also we do a lot of Chardonnay for Schramsberg, for the Blanc de Blanc. But we grow grapes for other wineries, including Pride Mountain and Stag's Leap over the years, and we make our own wines from here. So we have Pinot. The reason we haven't had it in the market, Madeline, is because we ran out.
That's a happy problem. No, I mean,
problem.
I feel
we don't have it.
We
don't have it in each market.
Okay.
This side, as you can see, is all these gravelly hills. On the left is old river bottom. So the Carneros Creek is right there. We're along the last mile of Carneros Creek. All of this is heavy clay soil, and all of this is super gravelly remnants of the Mayacamas Mountains. So this picture here, these are the eroded remnants of the Mayacamas that have come down over the years. And that picture I showed you is right at that intersection here. So one half of the vineyard is almost dry farmed. We do it for sparkling. The other half we do for still wines because it's very gravelly. And this is a map that we found from 1856. This was, 1848, before the gold rush. And basically, this map was from 1856. I have another one that's even older, but.
So this is pre-gold rush.
This is right after the gold rush.
Okay.
And as you can see, this is the vineyard now, except the whole bottom of it was a wetland. So we call it Poseidon Vineyard because they built a levee here off of Carneros Creek sometime in the 1860s, 1870s. And well, we called it Poseidon because when the levee breaks, then Poseidon gets the bottom 10 acres back. So that's the story. But we have, again, lots of fog. We have a marina right next door. You can sail your boat to where we are. Nobody ever believes me. And then I walk them out to the edge of the row and there they are. And again, fog is the determining factor here. So one thing to keep in mind is basically if the temperature of a grape gets below 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius, it stops metabolizing. So our fog, our ocean from the Alaska Current is roughly around 50 degrees. So that fog comes barreling in through the Petaluma Gap. And every night it's like taking our vineyard and putting it all into the refrigerator. And so what happens is that during the ripening period towards the whole year, I mean, this happens all summer, we get sunlight and brightness in the middle of the day, some warmth, but then every night it cools off. And that's very important for maintaining acidity.
What kind of temperature swing do you get?
Oh, typically from 80 to 50.
Oh, no, but that's significant because we think of diurnal swings. We talk about, altitude and diurnal swings. I don't commonly think of Carneros for that. So
yeah, well, if you think about it, all great wine regions, the single defining feature is they get down to around 50 degrees at night.
Right.
Burgundy because of latitude, Bordeaux because it's out by the coast, ocean, Argentina because it's up high. So it's either proximity to water, ocean, proximity to latitude or elevation.
And just to remind us all, grapes love that. And you heard Peter say it preserves the acidity. So even if you have even torrid temperatures during the day, like you'll have in Paso Robles, then their temperature plummets like 50 plus degrees. So they manage to make wines that, right.
If it didn't, it would ripen very quickly and wouldn't have time for the grape to develop what we call secondary and tertiary characteristics. It just doesn't get deep.
Somebody's
it's like taking a stew. It's like taking a stew off the oven too early. Like it just doesn't have time to put together.
Somebody's asking about the nuts.
The nuts.
The nets.
Oh, the nets.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The nets.
Birds. We have a lot of starlings. Behind us is that huge wetlands area I showed you. It's one of the most active flyways in North America. And starlings love grapes, especially Pinot because it's dark and they can see it. This is my father. This is now 10 years ago. He's now 94.
Nicholas, and he's still getting around.
Still getting around, yeah.
Great.
I still get emails about it. I went out to the vineyard and something wasn't right. So that's Carneros, and that's the Chardonnay that you had. To your question about the characteristics of Carneros, and in that wine, it's essentially clone 4 Chardonnay. It's one of the first Burgundian clones that got brought into California. It's often called the Martini clone, but it can be very, very, it has a lot of fruit weight to it. And if you over ripen it, you can get lots of tropical characteristics. Kendall Jackson Vintner Chardonnay is basically all clone 4.
No kidding, huh?
If you have it in a cool site and you don't over ripen it and you pick it in time, it has a combination of lots of acidity because it's a high acid varietal, and you have fruit weight. So there's a certain weight to this Chardonnay. This is not meant to be a front porch July Chardonnay. I mean, I usually oftentimes have this, with chicken or pork or, something a little heavier because it can stand up to it.
But it's not heavy-handed. It's really lifted.
No.
Now, I don't smell butter on this. Has this seen any mallow?
It has seen about half mallow.
And do you
Malolactic fermentation is a breaking down of malic acid that creates that buttery characteristic. Again, it's always a question of proportion, right? If it was a vanillin barrel, that would taste sweet. If it was malolactic, that would taste buttery. And then you could get things get overboard in a hurry. And we were trying not to do that.
Well, I paid the nicest compliment to the wine I can. I just poured myself another splash. So thank you. You can go on to Cabernet.
So I can use my Hungarian now. When we really like a wine, we say "Itocha magát," which means the wine drinks itself.
Itocha magát.
Yeah, like it keeps drinking itself. Like we're not involved at all anymore, right?
Fantastic.
So then we embarked on our Obsidian adventure 3 years ago. And it's not a misnomer, Obsidian Ridge. These are one of the many piles of obsidian rock that we pulled out during development. It's right here on the upper right. Looking back from Mount Canucki, we're looking here at Mount St. Helena. If you've been to Napa Valley, Calistoga is at the very top. At the right above Calistoga looms Mount St. Helena. This is looking at Mount St. Helena from the north. We're about 11 miles north of Mount St. Helena, so quite close.
So we're looking south? Is that how
we're looking
right
south
now?
here? Yeah, San Francisco would be in the far background. And this is called the Canucki Volcanic Shield. It is one of the youngest volcanic flows in North America. It was still exploding 10,000 years ago. It's recently been rated as the 33rd most active and or dangerous volcanic region, and it's right here. And our vineyard is right there next to the little lake. This vineyard and these pockets of obsidian were still exploding 10,000 years ago. Mind you, Native Americans moved into the basin 14,000 years ago. So it was definitely, and it is extremely volcanic, and it's one of the rare, like Etna has some red volcanics, but there aren't a lot of red wine regions that are predominantly volcanic. Chile has some, particularly with Pinot Noir, but Cabernet'S and volcanics are far and few between. And this is what it looked like when we found it. It was an abandoned walnut orchard. It was planted by an old Cal football coach named Pappy Waldorf. He was kind of the Vince Lombardi of our region over here for college. He and his friends planted 350 acres of walnuts on this rocky soil with no wells.
Did it work?
No. They named the company Nuts Incorporated. I'm not kidding you. And so they abandoned it after, I think, 10 years. So what you're looking at when we first saw this, I took this picture in 1998. When we first saw this, these were 50, 60-year-old walnut trees. They're probably my height, I'm 6 feet to maybe 8, 10 feet. We call them little bonsai walnut trees. And we use that as an indication, of course, of how poor the soil is, which we'd like. You know, mountain fruit needs to struggle, as we always say. Sometimes it makes us struggle a little more than we'd like, but that's where you get intensity. And so we really spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to farm up here. First of all, we had to move all the rock out of the ground to put in the irrigation lines. We have collected thousands of tons of obsidian. So if anybody wants to have rock decorations in your backyard, just pull up your
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. This stuff can be very sharp, and
it is. It's pure silica.
Yeah, the natives used it, right?
Yeah. So our site, in fact, the very top of the new planting we just did last 5 years is actually a surveyed archaeological site. It was used by Native Americans to create trading blanks, which they would trade across not only the North Coast region, now Sonoma Lake, Mendocino, but they have found Lake County obsidian all the way to the East Coast that had been traded 5,000 years ago. Each obsidian flow has its own molecular signature, and they're able to track it. This was not used for arrowheads. It was mainly used for basically skinning knives, dressing game, and also hatchets. Oh, it's very sharp. It's cut through a good number of my pickup truck tires.
Oh my God.
And this is what it looks like today. It's beautiful. It's a spectacular corner of California, and it's also quite different because this is what it looks like in the winter occasionally. The vineyard is the highest vineyard in the Mayacamas. It runs from 2,350 feet to 2,875 feet now. And it is different. We had our Toto, we're not in Kansas moment a few times farming up there. We got our hat handed to us. We didn't water well enough. We didn't leave enough leaves. We left the fruit out for too long. It's not so much that it's hot, it's just dry. It's dry. There's a lot of light. Every 1,000 feet you go up, you get 3% more UV light. It builds much thicker skins as a result because the fruit. Oh, this is I skied down it.
Whoa.
I was had a terrible accident with the dog right here, but that's luckily it all worked out. But this is what the climate is like up in the mountains. It's very, very different. Even though we are from the crow flies 2 miles from the Sonoma border, as you can see here, this is Healdsburg area here, and we are where the green arrow is. The cold air comes in from the Pacific. It gets pulled in by the heating of the Central Valley, and it pulls heat off the top of these ridges. So we have a very moderate climate up there. Last year I had one day that was over 100 degrees. Which is unusual for us in the North Coast.
And the breezes, they have a pretty clear shot.
So if we were down low, like in Poseidon,
right,
we have a clear shot because of Petaluma Gap.
Right.
We have a clear shot because we're up at almost 3,000 feet.
Oh,
so that
okay.
air mass is coming
Got
across us. That air mass is coming and scraping heat off of. And as you can see, this is research that was done around the changing climate due to climate change and global warming. These are data set back to 1971. As the Central Valley heats up, it's pulling more cold air into Ukiah and across these ridges. So our area is actually getting a little bit cooler statistically, and the valleys are getting warmer.
You just spoke a mouthful because a lot of people think, climate change equals global warming, but you're like the third or fourth wine person who said to me, we have the opposite happening to us.
It's so specific to where you are.
Right.
Look, it's not a good plan, honestly, but this is what the data is showing so far.
What does Clear Lake do? Do you mind telling us what effect that has?
Yeah, so Clear Lake, which I'll go back to here, is here, which is the name of the region. It is 2 billion years old. It's one of 2 oldest lakes in North America. The other one's in Florida. It's tilting at the same rate that it's actually filling up with sediment. It's tilting because of the tectonic plate that it's on. It does have a lake effect, especially down here for the Sauvignon Blancs, which are very, very nice from up there, and for the vineyards that are onto to the southeast of the lake. They do get winds that come across the lake. We do not, honestly. We're too far up and removed from the lake. We do get a diurnal. We have some effect, but it's not pronounced. And it's not always easy. I mean, these are ice crystals in November 2011.
Whoa, I have never seen that on Cabernet.
Yeah, we built fire rings to keep everybody's hands warm. We're picking. We have lots of mountain lion. This is right over the hill, right across the fence. The mountain lion left lunch. So we left it for him. We didn't know. This is a rattlesnake. You can see it right there. This was just last year. I was up in the back clearing some area, and luckily I kept my dog in the truck. But yeah, it is very, very remote and very, very raw country. And again, plenty of obsidian. So this was our new planting that we just completed 2 years ago. To give you an idea, these boulders are about 5 or 6 feet tall here. This is the original vineyard in the back. One thing to note in terms of the climate and because of mountains, it ripens at 3 different times because of this inversion layer and different temperatures. The top of the vineyard ripens quickly, gives us a lot of volume and fruit. The middle of the vineyard gives us quite a bit of tannin, and the bottom of the vineyard ripens very slowly and gives us a lot of aromatics. Vinifying and farming Obsidian Ridge is like almost having 3 different vineyards in one place. If this was flat, it would all ripen at the same time. So these are some of the components of high elevation viticulture, mountain viticulture. We do a lot of work with the Argentinians and the Swiss and the French on the effects of altitude on grapes. One of the things I was telling you about is that as you go up every 1,000 feet, you get 3% more ultraviolet light. Well, the grape, it protects its seed like every biological creature for the next generation. So it builds a thicker skin.
Right.
And those are the phenolics that create color, anthocyanins, tannins, all the flavors.
You've probably paid attention to, I know that Catena has done significant scientific research on high altitude viticulture.
Yeah, so Laura Catena, we've worked with them, and Ernesto Baida, who's their main, they've done a lot of fundamental research. It's been great. And more rock. This is all obsidian on the new planting. It's really quite something. This is a field of Obsidian that we pulled out. So people say Obsidian Ridge. It's a very good name. I said, well, it's Obsidian and it's a ridge. And this is our new planting.
Oh, it's beautiful. Do you know, I have to tell you, those rocks remind me of Sicily. It just occurred to me. You know, volcanic spill in Sicily. You've seen that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sicily is interesting, and also Sicily has elevation. It's an interesting parallel. I wanted to. We brought up a drone, and this pile is about 100 feet across, 40 feet. 100 feet long, 40 feet across, about 20 feet deep at its deepest. But as the picture pulls out, take a look at all the vegetation around. This is one of the things we really love about this site is all this forest. So we stayed within the footprint of the old walnut orchard. But we have all this forest around us, pine, manzanita, oak, and all of those. Grapes are very sensitive. They pull in a lot of compounds from the vegetation around them. The French have a term for this called garrigue, especially in the southern Provençal wines, oily plants like we have in California. So we have a real herbal, interesting forest note in these wines, I believe. Not green like you would imagine, like pine or so forth, but sort of a crushed herb like oregano and those kinds of things. And this is it in the very first. This was the very first picking of the new planting. This was 2019. We picked at night, and we just had a little rainstorm come in. Just cleared out. Took out my iPhone. Boom. I figured I'm not a great photographer, but the site is pretty.
This is all Cabernet?
It's not all Cabernet. Actually, it's 6 different clones of Cabernet: Petite Syrah, Petit Verdot, Malbec, Cab Franc, Merlot, and I think that's it. I think I got it.
What are you going to do with the Petite Syrah, and what was the other non-Bordelais?
So
variety?
we put the wine that you're drinking has some Petite Syrah and some Petit Verdot in it.
Kidding. I didn't know it had Petite
About
Syrah.
less than 5%. I can't tell you 2017 offhand, but yes, life is too short to just grow Cabernet.
Randy Frank just asked, how many years from the moment you plant to the moment you have usable grapes?
Yeah, good question. Usually the third leaf. So 2 years after you plant, you will have a little bit of fruit.
These are the fires. Whoa.
Yeah. So I wanted to share this with you too. I mean, it's not all easy. This is a picture I took on my way home from harvest in 2019. This was the first of the very devastating fires called the Valley Fire. It burned 70,000 acres in 48 hours. I actually drove into this fire because it was my way home, and I backtracked to get around on this dirt road. Interesting, I took this picture. This was right after it started, about an hour, maybe hour and a half. And I sent it to our wine grape commission, and she put it on Twitter, and AP Wire picked it up. It was one of the first pictures of that fire. And boy, I tell you, you'll never forget something like that. I mean, the sound and just the roar of that fire, the way the road was, I didn't know where the fire was. And we got out, and I was next to a fire department. I was never in any danger. Wildfire team, and I would imagine like standing in the middle of O'Hare as a jet engine takes off.
Oh my God, I just got chills. I hadn't even thought about
it's the only equivalent sound I could imagine. It was just absolutely nuts. So we've had many of them. You guys have all seen them. This was last September. We had an orange day. The whole North Coast turned orange. California, the Golden Gate Bridge. I'm sure you guys see all these pictures.
Right.
I happened to go up. It was this weird inversion layer that trapped all this orange smoke. I mean, it was just bizarre. This is Eli's Ridge, and we didn't make it harvest. We picked 500 tons and made it into compost because
it's
ruined by smoke.
Is worth. That's very poignant. I've never had anybody show us pictures like that. So this was all harvest that you couldn't use.
Yeah. So we actually had to build a moat, which sounds more romantic than it was. But this is just the juice that came out. We have 500 tons up there. We put it with straw. We made compost out of it. We put it back on the vineyard.
What year was this?
Well, it happened twice, 2018 and 2020.
Wow.
And the reason is you can make wines with these wines, but you have to be gallo and be able to blend them. They're not bad. They're not unhealthy for you. People say, oh, I like smoky components. I'm like, yeah, but you don't like burnt motel smell.
Right. Old cigarettes,
That's a whole different question. That's a whole different category than Southern barbecue. Yeah, you really have these very odd plasticky components that are pretty objectionable at certain levels. Now, you can have some smoke. We have made wines where we had wildfire near us. They're perfectly fine. In fact, with Cabernet, at some level, they actually make a nice component. But it is, it's part of what we do. It's part of, I started out with all of our sources. Well, this is our source. I mean, we live in a fire ecosystem, and it defines us. Some years we're going to have great wines, and some years we're not.
But the vineyards are okay.
Vineyards
the
are
next
fine.
year,
Nobody was
Yep.
hurt. We have N95s back then. We could all get N95s but keep people healthy and not working. But it's not without its beauty. I drove around after that fire, and this is a completely carbonized pine tree, the bark.
Wow.
This is oak tree that had been completely burned. It was a very, very sobering event. But about 5 days later, we were very lucky in 2015. We had an unusual rain event in middle of the week, Wednesday, I remember, because the fire started on Saturday. And I was walking in our upper block in our Petite Syrah, and I looked down and I saw this leaf, and it was black, completely carbonized on the backside. And I flipped it over, and it was this incredible pewter color. And I put it on carefully put it on the dash of my pickup truck and drove it down to our partner, Michael Terrian's wife, Hannah. She's an accomplished professional photographer, and she just put it up against a black felt background and took the picture. We have this hanging in the winery. It's absolutely stunning. It's just such a beautiful image. And then
Is
the
that
next
Nicholas?
year,
There's Nicholas.
the next year, we're back at it. 2018 was horrible. We lost it all. 2019 was the most perfect vintage I can recall. The very first fruit from there, my dad here was 92 years old. We use Palenque machines. They're these very, very delicate machines that help. We pick at night. We have the fruit cool and so forth. And this is what it looked like after 48 hours.
I want to taste that.
Yeah,
I'm jealous of that.
Going back
picture.
to thick skins, like basically we have so much color in the skins that we can leave it on the skins for usually 8 to 10, 12 days. Many Cabernets that of in Napa are on for 2-3 weeks. But if you can paint your house with this fruit after 4 or 5 days, it just has all the phenolics in the world. So this was a very symbolic wine because we put it into one of our first casks that we brought over to California. So we aged this wine in this cask. It's 1,200 liters or 12 hectoliters, and it's delicious. We just bottled it last week. And to tell you, there are a lot of people who work very diligently. This is Rene, who's our cellar master, has been with us. He's from Oaxaca. He's been with us now for just 10 years. There's a lot of work involved. This is one of our harvest interns, Millie.
Inside the tank, everybody, take a quick look, right?
Yeah. It looks like 10,000 leagues under the sea or something like that. And this is Alex Bellows, who is from Chicago, our winemaker. Alex grew up in his dad was a school teacher in Chicago, and he went on to great story. He went on to University of Champaign-Urbana to be a civil engineer. To make money in his spare time or to get through college, he found a person who was repairing stained glass in churches all around the Midwest. And so he became intrigued with stained glass, and he ended up going to Siena in Tuscany one summer just to learn more. And that's where he actually realized people drink wine every day. And so he tells this great story. He came back, and he was like his first job out of civil engineering, and he was counting cracks on a runway somewhere in the Midwest, and it's like 103 degrees and muggy. And he's counting cracks, and he goes, "This is no life for me." And he ended up quitting. He ended up working for Bottle Bin, one of the big Chicago stores. Binny's. Yes, he worked for Binny's. Alex worked for Binny's for, I think, 2 years. And then he packed up in his car, drove out, and became a cellar worker at cleaning tanks at Ravenswood. And anyway, over the 25 years, he's now become an accomplished winemaker. We were very happy. Wine and Spirits just last 2 weeks ago, the restaurant poll, which is all sommeliers and wine buyers, ranked us in the top 50 wines available in the U.S.
Bravo.
So,
well, I got to tell you, and I'm going to be, I never talk money. but I have to tell you, your Cabernet is one of the stone steals from the West Coast. It truly is. And was it a few days ago when we were talking, I said to Peter, please keep the price at least stable, you know, because it is just a teaching example of, yes, you can get staggeringly good wine for the money. You know, I mean,
Well,
my compliments to that.
Since we're among friends, I'll tell you the trick to that was that we bought this property at $4,500 an acre 25 years ago.
Free, right? Relatively.
At that time,
right.
Mount Veeder, Spring Mountain, and Diamond Mountain were at 75 or more, unplanted, by the way.
Right.
And I looked at myself, I was 29, 30 years old. My brother were like, we don't want to make a $100 bottle of wine. I mean, it's just, we don't want to buy 3 acres. Like at some point, I mean, I'd love to tell you that we had this wonderful strategy and we really thought it through, but the fact is we think that the story of West Coast winemaking is still being written. There are regions that are undiscovered. There are new places. You know, like they even say the blind pig gets the acorn. I mean, we got lucky with this site. It has a lot of things that we didn't know about it. It's north facing. It's so high in elevation. It's cool. But we've worked we work to try to make an honest drop out of it. And this is the wine that we just bottled. Yeah, we're working on the design. It's going to be very limited. I think we're just going to call it the Leaf. And for us, it's just a representation of, you know, you take the bad with the good and the good with the bad.
Does anybody want to weigh in on the Cabernet? I'm drinking, and I have to tell you, you know, to me, it is certainly rich, certainly concentrated. You know, people who love full bore Cabernet will not be disappointed in this wine. But frankly, it's got, you know, that horrible word that sommeliers we use, minerality, sort of that rocky tone to it that I find in the Douro and the Priorat, where you have that black fruit that is not overripe. It's not like smelling blackberry jam.
It's olive, not plum.
No, right. Yes. And, you know, the tannins,
savory, not sweet.
Savory, not sweet. And I love the comment about oregano, right? Dried oregano, you know, sort of garigi herbs. And, you know, the oak is simply background. But I just intellectualize this. I can't remember tasting a New World Napa Cab that I loved, that where that black currant wasn't the little black elephant in the room, where it was just pushing the wine. It's actually not a sidebar, but it's playing well with the other children, the other elements in this wine. And it's showing very well balanced. Oh, great question. Have you kept any Cabernet back? How does this stuff taste when it gets older? What aromatics
we have kept it back. We did a tasting of the first 17 vintages last year. It holds up very, very well. I mean, there's a lot of tannin in this wine from the fruit, because of the rocky conditions and because of the fact that it's mountain climate, and tannin is a preservative. Plus it has about 50% new oak, which is also preservative. Some interesting notes on that. So going to your question about the leanness or the minerality or what have you, the other thing that we talk about quite a bit, you know, it's easy to make Cabernet powerful. Right? Cabernet, especially West Coast Cabernets, can be really powerful. The trick is to make sure they still are pretty. And by pretty, I mean the high tones. You know, the lavender, the rose, the currant, that red currant, you know, if you notice, it's also there. Because otherwise it's like Phil Spector Wall of Sound. I mean, it's just like this warm, you know, this wall of fruit that runs into, you know, that gets you. Those wines are impressive, don't get me wrong. But it's not the whole point of Cabernet. I think
they're also
really
one-note wonders to a degree. Frankly, you're talking about it. This has the same floral tone that I get in great Argentine Malbec and in Douro Reds, you know, like the Tourigas. It's just got a great fragrance to it. The acidity is all natural. You don't have to acid adjust.
It depends on the year.
Right.
But not much, because a lot of the vineyard, by the time we're picking in October, the night times are 30, 40 degrees. So the acidity never really drops out. If we have a warmer season and we have to pick everything a little bit earlier, we have made adjustments, but not much.
If everyone wants a hell of a treat, if you've been tasting the Cabernet and you have the Chardonnay, go back to it, because it'll like throw it into relief. I don't know if you like doing that, Peter, or not, but
No, we often finish with white.
Does
We've
anybody
also
have
been known
any-
to finish with beer. That's
or champagne. That's my current favorite thing to do.
no, I'm just joking. Our joke is it takes a lot of beer to make good wine.
The Aussies will testify to that. That's where they come up
Yes.
with their crazy names. Does anybody have any questions or comments? You can unmute yourself. You can put them in the chat room. But I sincerely love these wines. Oh, tell us about this guy.
Yeah. So my last thought here on this tour of our world is this: at the bottom of Obsidian, between the two vineyards, the two plantings, is a mall oak. It's a type of interior live oak. It's extremely dense. They call it mall, like a handle for an axe or a maul. And they also made wagon axles with it. But this is, we had an arborist came out 20 plus years ago. I wasn't there. And it measures 36 feet around. It's 98 feet tall, has a 120-foot drip line, and it's estimated to be between 600 to 800 years old.
600 to 800 years old.
Yeah, so it's we don't know for sure, but it's most likely the largest interior live oak in North America.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And it sits right in this beautiful little basin. It's got lots of water. We have a lot of water in this region, in the volcanics that trap a lot of water over the years. It's perfectly healthy, and it's stunning. And it's always a good reminder when we're having a not great year, like this tree's leading a lot of good years and a lot of not so good years over the years.
And is this on your property?
So this is a part of the original property, yes. So at this point, it's between the two parcels. The family who we bought the parcels from still own the one in between, and this tree is on their parcel, the Wilson family.
Randall Frank wants to know, how many vintages do you have in your cellar? And probably the subtext is, gee, do you ever sell them, or can we get our hands on them?
Yeah, so we have, we did start a library program at the winery, and we do release older vintages, especially. So we also have done some interesting bottlings of Malbec, of Petit Verdot. Currently we have Petite Syrah available to the club. We make a Syrah as well. Individually. We also have our reserve wine is the Half Mile, which is predominantly it's defined by Petit Verdot. It's a Cabernet, it's 75% Cabernet, and the rest is Petite Syrah and Petit Verdot.
Huh.
And that's our reserve wine. We do have wines. We were younger and not as strategic as we should have been, and probably didn't leave behind as much wine as we should have.
But Half Mile is available in our market, folks. If you're listening to that, and if you're inclined to, and I think I'm going to get a bottle and taste it, because I haven't indulged in that. I've been perfectly fulfilled by your Obsidian Ridge Cabernet. So, and there is a comment here coming from Della. She doesn't favor white, but the Chardonnay is simply better, more complex than any she's had. Yay, Della. I can't disagree with that. And Elisa, who is, by the way, you have killer representatives in Metro Detroit. Lisa, of course, Weber Santin is Little Guy Wine Company, which I think is a spectacular home for you. And we deal with Antoine, who's been on many of our tastings together, but they're great ambassadors. The Half Mile is that higher? Is that like upwards of 2,600 feet? Where are we going with that?
Yeah, so the top of the original planting is exactly 2,640 feet in elevation. So, which is half a mile in elevation. So that's hence the name came from that. So almost all the vineyard, almost all that bottling comes from the crown of the vineyard, the original planting. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I missed, because I was reading the chat room. What kind of, what altitude are we at? With
2,000. That wine is at 2,640 feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you look at the top of your corks, you'll see the feet. And actually, if you look at the top of the cork of the Poseidon, you'll see sea level, which I thought was completely charming. So what's the future hold for you guys?
Well, yeah, so funny. Somebody asked me, like, what do I hope for our wine company? As the Canadian conversation, I said, you know what, make good wine, die happy. No, we are very, very happy with those vineyards. We do make we're making more. We did a Pinot Noir Pet Nat this year. We did a Chardonnay Piquette. We do fun one-off wines just to keep things interesting. We call it the rabbit hole. We've always considered ourselves rabbit hole winemakers, going down the rabbit hole. I mean, going to this crazy volcanic region with these abandoned walnuts and using all Hungarian oak. It's not the typical route, but we've enjoyed the discovery. And so we'll continue down that path. I think the larger casks are something that's very exciting. I really like the Chardonnay and the Pinot and the big 3,000 liter ovals. We're making those, they're lighter, brighter style as well. And so those are some of the directions we go into, but, you know, we have our ingredients, we know what they are. And, you know, we like to play with them. These are my partners, Michael Terry on the left and my brother on the right. And this is the team. Many of us have worked together for now 2 decades or more. We really enjoy working together and making wine, and we thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoy them.
So we had a question about the wine club. So this is on your website, right? And I think you ship to Michigan. I mean, we love to sell the wine to you, but if we don't have your pet nat and your rabbit hole wine, so we can look for those on the website.
Yeah, so those are available. A lot of those are wine club wines. We make 200-300 cases of them. Actually, the pet nat, which we named the Hungarian word pezsgő, which is sparkling wine, is very, very popular. So we're looking to hopefully bring that out into the marketplace next year.
Now's
I don't
the time.
know. It's way above my pay grade, which markets and how and all that sort of thing. They keep me in the dark that way, which
Bellows,
is a good idea,
thanking
which is a pretty
you
good
for-
idea.
Oh, no. And pet nat is something that's very hip to a demographic that's hugely important to us right now, both on and on premise. And that's people who are younger than we are. So, you know, thank you.
Yeah, pet nats, we call it basically farmer's champagne. You know, that was an easier one-step method of making sparkling wine as it was done in the old days. And it makes great wines and they're fun to drink. So we have a lot of Pinot, sparkling Pinot that we use for mum, and we'll probably be making more and more of that as the time goes on.
And Elisa, there is half mile gettable in Michigan, even if, is that correct? Because even if we don't have it in the stores, it can be requested.
It's available.
Oh, thank you for unmuting. I forgot that was an
Hi.
option.
Sorry, I'm not in a camera available moment.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to see what we could tease people
Yes.
with. And
Half mile is available and highly
Okay.
recommended.
wonderful.
I wanted to pick up on just last thing. There was a note in the chat about the trees and the forests and so forth. Yeah, we actually, Central Europe, particularly Hungary, is one of the oldest ongoing sustainable forest practices in Europe. It started in the 1500s, but it was really codified by Empress Maria Theresa in 1769. And even today, a lot of the practices in the forest are from that time. They've been upgraded, but for example, we can only cut basically 10 acres at a time. Clear cutting, you have to use a 100-year cutting cycle. It's very complex and well managed. So it doesn't help anybody to cut them all out at once.
It sounds like it's more tightly managed than cork trees in southeastern Portugal, because I know that they have rules and regulations about when you can harvest them. And,
these have been developed over many, many decades and centuries.
I think somebody's showing us a bottle of half mile, unless I'm wrong, but we can be jealous. What's that wine like? Can you describe it to us? Is it more concentrated than this?
So I'll tell you how that wine started, and I'll back into how it's like. So John Caldwell is a kind of a legend in the wine business, and he's done a lot of different things. Caldwell Wines, he's up in Coombsville. John had at that time in the late 90s, he was bringing in all these exotic clones of Cabernet and different varietals from France and the other parts of the world. He had a nursery. So I called up John and he brought him up there. He goes, okay, listen, don't forget to plant Petit Verdot. Now, Petit Verdot is to grapes what sturgeon is to fish. It's like sturgeon is this dinosaur leftover. Petit Verdot is like this dinosaur grape. It goes to ground. It takes forever to get through Eurasian. It never tastes very good on the vine, to be completely honest with you. But it is massive. And that's why the Bordelais used it to give color to the Bordeaux. But usually they would use 2-3%. Anyway, we put it in a barrel and we left it for 3 years. I think we kind of forgot about it, to be completely honest with you. But what was interesting about it is that it sort of cracked open. Michael talks about this. He was our winemaker at the time. He's our founding winemaker. He said it cracks open, you get this intense lavender character. One of the few varietals that really does that. So we put the first half mile together. I think it was in 2006. It was like 90% Petite Verdot. Nobody does that. That's like
No, you can't find varietally labeled.
that doesn't make any
Verdot.
sense. It scored 94 points with Robert Parker. And what was funny, it was a brand new barrel, 3 years. And it was funny, if I were to bring it up there, it's the back corner. It's kind of jammed up against the forest. There's rocks everywhere. I mean, it is not the place you would come out and say, this was like the best wine we ever made. Anyway, since that time, the style has evolved. But Petite Verdot is the cornerstone of that wine. Again, that long lavender character. So it is a bigger wine. We use Petite Syrah as well. One winemaker friend made that Petite Syrah is awesome. It's like the spackle of grapes. If you have holes in your wine, if you put in some percentage of Petite Syrah, it just fills in all the gaps, which is what I think it does here. And then it's 75% or so. I don't remember the numbers exactly, but for each vintage, but it's 75% of 4 different clones of Cabernet. So
it's kind of, you've got chutzpah, because I mean, I think of Cabernet Sauvignon, it doesn't really need help in terms of like color or power, but I didn't know about the aromatic about Petite Verdot.
Yeah, the aromatics. So the lavender character, if you age it long enough, you cannot take Petite Verdot out early. It's like the monster under the bed. You gotta wait. For till daylight, but what you should do is it's aged in 100% new oak. One interesting thing about new oak, and we do a lot of research on oak. Oak has very high antioxidant properties, especially new oak. We put electrodes in one part of stave and then another, and then shoot how fast electricity goes between them, and that gives you an idea of antioxidant potential. This is not new. In Burgundy, historically, they would only use new oak on the very best vintages because they wanted to have them last the longest amount of time. So new oak creates freshness in wine and aromatics. Now you can kill it and have too oaky, don't get me wrong. But in this case, the wine can stand up to 100% new oak, and it spends almost 2 years, I think 20 months, 22 months, depends on the year.
So it helps it age.
It helps it age. It's a longer lasting wine. It's definitely a winter wine. It's a good wine in Midwest when the sun hasn't been out for 3 or 4 days.
That's why we're not like San Diego.
Right.
We can't
it's
imagine.
Snowy, and it's probably February 26th, and you're like, I gotta open this.
I'm always amazed that people, especially in Southern California, can ever be grumpy. You know, our sun comes out and we're like, yeah.
Oh, I went to school in Western New York, so I got a little taste of that.
I have to tell you, I mean, I'm going to, strongly suggest. I know we had like at least 2 to 3 members of our wine team on tonight, but this was so special. You were, so generous personalizing this for us, Peter. I feel that we've been to Hungary, Carneros, and Lake County, and
all on Zoom, who knew?
No, I can't thank you enough, but I'll tell you something. You have fast friends with us. And the wine is in the glass, as the saying goes. So the story, if it's not in the glass, the story, doesn't resonate, but yours sure does. And can you give us one more Hungarian snippet just so we can hear the melody of it? I don't think I can pronounce it.
Let me think. Appropriate. Well, viszont látásra, which means until we meet again.
A bientôt in French, right?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
Oh,
thank you so much for supporting our wines, and I hope you enjoyed. You come out and visit anytime. We have a nice spot in Sonoma where we have a tasting room, and it's we really enjoy the work, and we enjoy sharing it with you guys.
We're thrilled to look forward to seeing what you've got in store in the future. And everyone, I almost forgot because we didn't have an official invitation prepped yet, but we will next week. It is on the website. If you go to the Plum Market events page, May is Michigan Wine Month. And we are on May 13th, 2 weeks from now, going to have not 1, not 2, but 4 Michigan winemakers on. We're going to have Casey from Shady Lane. We're going to have both Charlie Edson, who is kind of winemaker emeritus, and Blake from Bel Lago. And we're going to have the famous and infamous Sean from Mari, previously Chateau Grand Traverse. We're doing all white wine. I love this. And offbeat, we're doing Gruner Veltliner, to show what it can do in northern Michigan. We're doing sparkling Auxerrois because all of us have had Belagos still Auxerrois. And we're going to, I racked myself up back and forth with Mike Pfeiffer from Ann Arbor, wondering what Mari wine to show. And we decided to throw caution to the wind. You're going to love this, Peter. His wine is called Bestiary, as in like animal. And it's a Ramato. It is a very specifically produced Pinot Grigio, Pinot Gris made in a natural wine style. So don't miss that. May 13th, we're calling it Michigan Today, and it's a winemakers roundtable. Big hug from the Midwest, Peter.
Thank you. Great to see everyone. Take care.
Thank you for your company, everyone. And I'm going to make everybody watch this because I've got, 4 pages of notes scribbled, and I might twist your arm to see if you will share some of those slides with me so I can be a good ambassador.
Yeah, we actually have a lot, in more detail, actually, on our website, we have some of our seminars that we've done for the trade, actually, on elevation, on oak.
So you don't mind if I use the slides?
No, please.
God love you. Some wineries are not that generous, but it certainly fleshes it out. And now I've got the stories behind them.
And there's already some recorded ones as well. So
wonderful.
We'll send it to you.
Everyone for your company. Peter, all the best to you and your family. Tell Arpad he missed a hell of a tasting, eating oysters.
Well, yeah, he's suffering eating oysters by the sea. My heart goes out to him. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
A biento in Hungarian. What's it again?
Viszontlátásra.
There you go.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.